the trade deadline's coming up, and I was just thinking something to make the trade deadline more fun. They should do the trade deadline like the old New York Stock Exchange, like I'm thinking specifically of the scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, great film, where they're at, I think it's like a commodities exchange or something, and everyone's just on the floor screaming out shit and just holding up like hand signals. That's what the trade deadline should be in MLB, I think. That'd be sick. Imagine they just broadcast that. And you get live look-ins, like all the GM should be mic'd up, like just should be a good peek into how business is done in baseball. It's like, okay, no, I'll give you this guy for this guy. No, that doesn't work. You hold a bunch of numbers, a bunch of fingers, a bunch of yelling, just chaos. Wouldn't that be fun? They should do that. Honestly, that'd be sweet. That'd make the trade deadline absolutely sick. But they won't. Trade deadline is still really fun, and it looms large. But that is, we'll talk about that at the end of the show. Welcome back, everyone, to the Chaos Ball Podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. As I sit here, the Mariners have just lost the third game of the series to the Blue Jays. They took 2 out of 3. Man, the game literally just ended like 5 minutes ago. That was a tough one. The Blue Jays aggressively tried to blow that game like they did the other ones too. They just seem to be like addicted to the idea of blowing a big lead to the Seattle Mariners for whatever reason. It was never really a big lead today, but man, you had first and second, no one out. You bunt JP, which, listen, I'm letting JP swing the bat. He's been swinging a hot bat. I'm letting him swing it. Whatever. 1 out. Second and third, Julio's up. Strikes out. I'm ready to declare that Julio doesn't have the clutch gene, at least right now. I think he's got to get his clutch gene drip up a little bit, in my opinion. But he strikes out. Geno, fly ball, game over, deflating. Deflating end of the weekend of an otherwise really fun weekend, honestly. And games I didn't even watch a ton of for various reasons. But I've watched the recaps of what I did watch. It was good. I mean, they beat the Jays. 2 out of 3 after splitting a series with the Twins. I think they gained 1 game in the wild card this weekend, which is something like the offense did look a little bit better. Still just kind of middling around 500 like they have been the whole year. Not much has really changed. I'm sitting here again and saying, wow, they're right around 500. Crazy. I mean, I did title last week's episode The Purgatory of Mid because that's just where they are. That's where they've been, and that's where they stay. And it still rings true. Still, longest win streak, 4 games. Longest losing streak, 4 games. Still just can't. Man, it felt like today was going to be that day where they get a sweep and they win 4 in a row, and then it just didn't happen. It was deflating. It's been like that all year, or vice versa, where they lose 2 or 3 and then have like a really nice win to pick us up. They're just keeping us on an emotional roller coaster, which is the baseball season, though. It's doing these week to week is partly why I don't dive into the games specifically, because baseball changes so much in a couple weeks, and it's hard to make concrete takes game by game. It's just difficult in this sport. I remember listening to a while ago someone talk about some statistician, and there's a consensus obviously that like a full season of baseball, 162 games, and even like the postseason where you can play 180 190 total in a year, depending on how many games you play in the postseason. I guess, how many could you play? 7 or 5? Yeah, 180ish. That's not even good enough to truly evaluate who the best teams were. Like, at least in just a regular season, like 162. Basically, people have come to the consensus that realistically, you'd need like 2 full seasons of the same team to really gauge how good a team is. And then you throw the wrench of the trade deadline in there. For the last 2 months of the season, teams can change dramatically. It's just a crazy sport to be a fan of because of how long the season is, how much your team can change throughout the course of a season. Like, your team can change a lot in like the NBA by virtue of there just being less players on the team. But baseball's crazy because I mean, like, the Nationals started 19-31 and won the World Series. Like, the Braves didn't have a great start to 2021, and they added some pieces at the deadline, and their team came alive, and they won the World Series. Like, that's how it goes sometimes. And it's weird to evaluate a team game by game, even week by week. Like, I do this. I just do this because I need stuff to do with myself for an hour every week. But I don't know. They still sit right where they've been the whole year. They're going to the Twins and the D-backs this week. That's not a fun week. That's not an easy week. And then the trade deadline on Monday, next Monday. It's right there. It's coming up. But I'll get. I have just notes from this week from Mariners baseball. You know, I might do the baseball reference player of the week this week. I might not be able to fit it in with just stuff I have on the docket. But before I get to other Mariners stuff, I got to talk about how Cal Raleigh just owns the entire country of Canada. This weekend, multiple home runs from him. Teoscar had some good revenge moments. He had a walk-off. He had game-winning RBI on Saturday, walk-off on Friday. Really good series for the Bats, but especially Cal Raleigh. He savaged the Blue Jays like he has savaged them historically the past 2 years. Obviously, he had the 2-home-run game, but Mariners PR tweeted out something that is just hilarious. It's that dating back to the 2022 postseason, Cal Raleigh has hit 6 home runs over his last 6 games against the Toronto Blue Jays, and he didn't play today, so that still stands. Hilarious. He owns them. And it was funny, actually, going over to see some Blue Jays fans' tweets on Twitter. They're just like, get Cal Raleigh needs to stop. Like, it was just torture. Really, really funny. Really good to see Cal. And even, like, Gino's hitting better. Teo had a good weekend. Tough they lost today and didn't complete the sweep, especially a sweep with all of the Blue Jays fans in attendance. Oh, that would have been tasty. I mean, at least the first 2 games were heartbreaking losses. As I said earlier, they're just addicted to losing to the Mariners like that for some reason. Even better to see with the pilgrimage of Toronto Blue Jays fans to Seattle that happens every year. It's good to see them even just winning the series as a plus, especially against this Toronto team who's been rolling as of late. They've been playing really good ball. And then another note from today, I want to say, before anything else, Geno Smith threw out the first pitch of today's game to J.P. Crawford. Why didn't he throw it out to Eugenio Suarez, to Geno Suarez? What are we doing? Come on. Have Geno to Geno. I mean, listen, it's stupid. But that would have been awesome. Come on. That's just a simple slam dunk you should have done. Maybe Geno said no. He said no. I will not. I will not catch a ball from the other Geno in Seattle. But let's get into it. Let's get into the news of the week. I want to come out and say it before anyone else. I'd like to come out and say I'm the first podcast that is openly against coolers. I know. It's a stance that not many people want to take. I mean, coolers they've been good to humanity for a long time, keeping our drinks cold and whatnot. But they've had it too good for too long, and now they've fractured Jared Kelenic's foot, and I simply won't stand for it. So I'm adamantly against coolers. If you are a pro-cooler, cooler sympathizer, if you lobby for pro-cooler rights in the government, I want you out of here. Stop listening right now. They fractured our man Jared Kelenic's foot, and it came at a point where just when you think things couldn't get worse, they got worse. I mean, they thankfully ended up beating the Twins in the final game of that series, but everyone knows by now, Jared Kelenic, he struck out to Yohan Duran at the end of that game on Wednesday. Couple men on, it was really tough at bat. It was like 10 or 12 pitch at bat, which is crazy to do with that guy. Maybe the filthiest reliever in baseball. He was pumping 104. And he throws a splinker and like a 92-mile-an-hour slider. It's insane. Great at bat, and ends up striking out on a beautiful backdoor curveball. Like, it couldn't have been a better pitch in that spot, and you just got to give it up to Duran. But apparently Kelenic kicked a cooler, fractured his foot. I think the prognosis came out yesterday. I think it's 4 to 6 weeks, which just is so deflating. I mean, that puts the timetable like maybe he's back in August. Maybe. Realistically, probably not until September. That just sucks. It's deflating. He was starting to hit better too. The past week, stuff was falling for him. There was a clear approach change at the plate. I mean, he had slumped for a while, and even like his outs, even the Yohan Duran at bat, like that was a fantastic at bat. And it ends up he didn't lose that at bat. Yohan Duran just won that at bat, flat out. And he kicks a cooler and fractures his foot, and man, it's one of those that's like, man, come on, really? And he clearly felt bad. If you haven't seen the video, I'm sure all of you have seen the video if you're a Mariners fan, or even baseball. It was circulating all of baseball on Twitter, even on like MLB Network. Had a video of him in the dugout talking to press. He was really emotional, saying how he messed up. He let the team down. He let the fans down. I mean, it stinks. It's not going to change his fractured foot. It's a good reminder that athletes are indeed humans, and I think a lot of us need that reminder sometimes. Not specifically talking to myself, but a lot of people who direct things at athletes online. It's good to remind them that they have human emotions. Clearly just was blinded with rage and fractured his foot, and emotional, crying, saying sorry. Just, I don't have much else to say. It just stinks. It's tough. It's tough to see him know he let, everyone down. He let himself down at the end of the day. I mean, the man's a baseball robot. He's been bred to play baseball since he was a little kid, basically. And to see him go through the past 2 years of struggles and continue is amazing in and of itself. Shows a lot of mental fortitude, and then it also shows the human condition that he's gone through all of that and one at bat at the end of the game, and you have a rage and fuck up a little bit and break your foot. That can break you, and it sucks. So now they're without Jarred Kelenic for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Cade Marlowe got called up in his stead, which unfortunate circumstances to finally see Cade Marlowe up in the bigs, but he's up now. He hadn't had the best year in AAA, but the past few weeks he had been hitting a lot better, so I don't think it wasn't like undeserving of a call-up, and I think at the very least Cade Marlowe, what he can do is fill in the outfield defensively and provide some value on the base path. He didn't look super lost at the plate in his first game, his first at-bats. He looked fine. He drew a walk. As long as he can kind of just get on base occasionally and act as a pinch runner sometimes, that's going to be value. He had a 25-25 season last year in the minors. I think he had like 20 bags swiped this year. With the new rules, it's safe to say we're going to see him swipe some bags as long as he sticks in the big leagues. Just really tough circumstances to have him get called up. And that's that. That's Kelenic's foot, man. That news was a backbreaker. He's been one of the best hitters for the offense this year, and losing him is crucial in these final months of the season. I don't think it really shapes anything they'll do at the deadline. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. I doubt it, especially because of DePoto's comments that I'll get into. But I was thinking about this. If you told me before the season started that Jarred Kelenic would fracture his foot in July, and the reaction from the fan base would be that, like, a lot of support for him, but also just like dread because of how crucial he's been to the offense this year, I don't know if I'd believe you, but he has been. A lot of the wins at the start of the year have been because of him. He's had a lot of go-ahead RBIs and just been a really actually solid big leaguer this year, which is more than anyone could have expected or wanted from him this year. He's done more than we thought, more than I thought, at least. I was hoping he'd be like an average to below average player, and it's had ups and downs, but he was putting together a pretty decent season. Hopefully he comes back and the Mariners are somehow still in it down the stretch, and he comes back and helps the team for a playoff push. I mean, that would be the best case scenario given where they're at right now. Because after today, I think they're, 4.5 back of the wild card? Yeah, 4.5 back of Toronto and the wild card. So they did gain one game on them, I guess. But like Baltimore's rolling right now. Losing 2 to the Twins was tough, but they're playing a little bit better ball. They're still 8.5 back of the division lead, 5.5 back of Houston for second in the division. They're a half game back of the Angels now. And the trade deadline looms. The trade deadline is looming like the eye of Sauron. And what is Jerry Dipoto going to do? He had his show the other day. I think it's Friday mornings. I don't generally listen to it because I don't listen to radio much and I work, and I get to just see the snippets afterwards. I think is more valuable for me. Essentially, he said their approach to the deadline was not a huge buyer, not a huge seller, which is not at all surprising. He kind of just said they're going to reposition the team for next year, not be super aggressive at the deadline, which I honestly don't hate. Like, I don't think they should be trading any of their top 100 prospects right now for talent for this year. I will make that stance. I don't think they should get rid of any of them. I think they're going to need them in the next couple of years, as long as their development is on track. Their farm is thin as it is. I mean, this draft helped, but this draft also, the main guys in this draft are prep kids who will take a lot longer in development. And right now you got a lot of guys in high A cooking offensively. And I think you're going to need them in a few years to provide some value for you. And I just don't think they should be trading them right now, especially where the team's at. I don't know what you could trade, who you could trade for that would really propel this team into true contention. I still think they could contend. I mean, they're only 4.5 back of the wild card. And you could say this till the season ends. One good stretch. Like 2 weeks and they win like 10 of like 12 in those games. Like if they just go on a run, they just can't seem to do that. But it's baseball. Anyone could go on a run. They randomly rattled off 14 wins in a row last year. Like theoretically, that could happen again. Obviously, you shouldn't count on it. I just don't know who would really move the needle to get rid of prospects for this team right now. I think it'll be more patchwork, trying to throw stuff at the wall. I have some ideas I'll go into later, but that was Dipoto's position, reposition-ish for next year, not be super aggressive. He'll probably do a little bit of buying, a little bit of selling, I imagine. And repositioning the team for next year is not the worst idea. I mean, if they don't make the playoffs this year, they're not in the worst spot, obviously. They will have guys coming back healthy next season. All of their core will be with them next year and hopefully take a step forward after what we've seen so far this year. It's just tough to not punt on this year, but it's just, if they're just going to hover around 500 like the projections said they were supposed to, like they've been doing, I don't know about mortgaging a lot of your farm for help right now is really worth it in the long run, especially given how strong the American League is. Because it's worth noting all these teams are going to try to get better. Basically, I don't know, 8 to 10 teams are going to try to get better. Every AL East team, maybe. Like the Orioles will probably look for pitching. The Rays will make some moves probably that will look insignificant to some, but probably very significant for the Rays. The Blue Jays will be buyers. The Yankees and the Red Sox, I don't know. They're in the wild card right now. They're just 4th and 5th in their division, but they're above the Angels and the Mariners in the wild card. So I think they're in a similar spot. I don't think they'll be aggressive buyers, but I think they will buy a little bit. They'll probably sell where it's smart to sell. Like the Red Sox will probably offload Paxton if they're smart. But I don't know. That's a weird position for them. The Angels, I don't even know how much more capital they even have to move to buy, but they're still 4 out of the wild card. There's a chance. I mean, obviously Shohei Ohtani's the main conversation with them, but who knows what they're going to do. I mean, Texas will probably look for more pitching. Astros will probably look for more pitching. Minnesota will probably look for some offensive help. Cleveland will look for some offensive help because they're 3 games out of the Central and right behind the Angels and the Mariners in the wild card. It's just loaded. It's packed. The AL East presents a very interesting issue because all of those teams theoretically could make the playoffs, all 5, and they might. They might. You never know. Because the only team that's not an AL East team in the playoffs for the American League right now, obviously the other 2 division winners, but then the Astros are sitting second in the wild card. So I don't know. It's just you're buy if you went aggressive buy at the deadline, you'd be aggressively competing about buying with the rest of those teams. That's what also just makes it very tough. And it's not a deadline where huge names are going to move. Besides Shohei Ohtani and, like, I don't know, Bellinger, Stroman, like, there's not a Soto. Like, Ohtani's a special case because we don't really know. Like, we knew Soto was going to get traded. Shohei's just a big question mark. Like, Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, Max Scherzer said he was open to getting traded, but that's not as big as a Max Scherzer trade as it was a couple of years ago if you're making it at the deadline. It's just there's fewer names and more teams competing right now with the new format of the playoffs, so that's makes it that much tougher. And I'm for Dapoto's stance on repositioning Ish for next season, and not completely punting on this year because the team as it is could again go on a run. You never know. But with that being said, some more Mariners notes. I'll go over some more notes before some trade deadline talk, and I'll end the show with a little trade deadline prediction and the predicament that I am currently in with the trade deadline next weekend. I want to talk about Julio. I want to talk about Julio Rodriguez. He had a homer this weekend, which was good to see. A homer to the pull side, which is a rarity in this day and age for that man. Right now, he is slashing 245, 313, 403. It's not amazing. It's not very good at all. It's like right around league average. He has a 104 WRC plus. He has 2.7 Fangraphs WAR, which a lot of that's base running and defense, which still very valuable. But it's just not the season we expected from the man. And I think it's a sophomore slump, and it's happened before. I mean, we saw Vladdy and like Pete Alonso and even Aaron Judge. They came up and they lit the world on fire as rookies, and then the next season they had a sophomore slump. Like, look at Michael Harris this year. That's happened to him. Like, I guess Spencer Strider to an extent. I mean, he's striking out more people than last year, but he's given up more runs. Like, his ERA is higher. It happens. And what's specifically wrong? I think it's mechanical. Because you look at his raw stats, and some of it is nothing's really jumping off the page on like a Fangraphs or Baseball Reference page. Really, some of it is, but like if you look at walk rate, strikeout rate, like that is where I'd look sometimes if a guy's just really cratering, and that really hasn't changed. Like what's changed is if you go to his like Baseball Savant page. But I'm on his Fangraphs right now. Like his walk rate last year was 7.1%. This year it is 7.7%, so walking slightly more. His K percentage last year was 25.9%. This year it's 26 even, so that's the same. That's still right around league average. It's higher than I'd want, but you can be a very good hitter and strike out 26% of the time, like he was last year. And you look at, like, he has a lower batting average, and for that reason, a lower OBP. It's still, the OBP and average difference is roughly the same. It's not a huge discrepancy. The slugging is where it drops off. His slugging last year was 509. This year, it's 403. And, like, you look at, it tracks when you look at his isolated power. His isolated power, and for any of you who don't know, isolated power is just, it's like batting average, but just taking extra base hits. So it's slugging minus average. So it's just kind of average with doubles, triples, home runs, with emphasis on all of them. Last year it was 225. That's a great ISO. This year it's 158. He's just hitting less extra base hits. He's just getting less hits in general. His BABIP last year was 345. His BABIP this year is 308. So I don't even think he's getting less unlucky. I think he probably got a little bit luckier last year, but you're going to run a higher BABIP if you hit the ball hard, and he hits the ball pretty hard when he hits it. And so a high BABIP is not really out of the realm of possibility for him. What's really like a difference, obviously, is those power numbers have dipped, and it's noticeable at the plate. It's very noticeable, and I'm not a swing expert. I probably know maybe a little bit more about mechanics than like the average fan, but not, enough to tell you to take my word as gospel here. But the power to the pull side has not been there, which is why it was nice to at least see him crank a bad pitch into the left field bullpen at T-Mobile the other day, because he hasn't done that much this year. He did that a lot last year. A lot of power to the pull side. This year, he's still hitting the ball hard. It's been a lot more opposite field, and it's been a lot more hitting the ball hard-ish to the left side, but on the ground. Like when he's hitting the ball to the left side, it's not as hard as it was last year, and the fly ball percentage to the left side of field is not as high either. And you can tell. You don't need stats to tell you that. If you've watched the Mariners consistently, you can see that. And hitting the ball the opposite field is good, but it's good when you're also hitting the ball to the left side of the field hard. You got to do it with different pitches. That would be the point. So pull side power is just the big issue I see this year, and he's just pulling the ball less. He's not hitting it as hard over there, like I said, not hitting it in the air as much on the left side. The pitches are traveling too deep in the plate, and he's not getting around on them. He's making contact like way too late to get a meaningful power to the left side of the field. I hope it can be fixed mechanically. I don't know how to fix it. Send him the drive line. Like, I'm sure they could diagnose. Like, JP went to driveline this offseason, and look what season he's having. Fantastic year at the plate. Would it hurt, really, this offseason to send Julio to driveline? I don't think so. Or send Julio to that magician Aaron Judge swing coach who I watch on YouTube sometimes. That guy's hilarious. He's if you haven't, go look up Aaron Judge's swing coach. Because Aaron Judge came up, and like I said, he had that crazy rookie year. He cooled off. He found this guy, the swing coach, and it's completely changed, obviously. And look at Aaron Judge now, like fantastic hitter, probably the greatest 6'7" or whatever hitter we've ever seen. It's very hard to be a hitter at that height and be really good. And a big thing of that swing coach is hands, twisting the hand, staying back with the ball, using your back leg to drive your power. That's what Aaron Judge does. That's what that swing coach has taught him. I don't know with Julio. It's mechanical. I don't know how to fix it. The ball is just traveling too far, and that is why we're seeing a lot more opposite field hits from him and less power to the pull side. Because if you can't get your hands around on a pitch in the zone to hit it hard to the left side, like, you're not going to be an amazing hitter. And he was doing that last season, so I don't know exactly what's changed. Obviously, pitchers had that whole last year to examine and to know how to attack him. That's definitely a huge part of a sophomore slump like this. It's just now up to Julio and the coaching staff of the Seattle Mariners and the front office to adapt back. And he's got to just get the power to the pull side again. That's it. I think that's really what'll fix it. And yeah, I don't know what else to do with him. It's been an average year from him in a year where everyone was expecting him to take another step, which is dangerous sometimes, especially for the front office. This is way more on the front office than the fans' expectations, because the front office set high expectations for this team and built it so that they kind of built it so everyone would have to have close or right around their best seasons to really contend, to be a meaningful contender, and that starts with Julio. I think they were counting on him putting up a 6 to 7 WAR year, at least another 5 WAR year like he did last year, and that's dangerous to just kind of go into a season counting on that, especially from a kid who's that young. Like, this season I don't think it's indicative of what the rest of his career is going to be, because I think he's clearly committed to getting better, works really hard, has a great attitude, obviously has all the all the physical tools, and he's gifted enough to be a premier MVP caliber player. He just has to come back from this, and I think some mechanics are going to have to change in his swing. And that's that for Julio. It's weirdly been an average year where still he's providing great defense and good base running. So there's that. I think that's also what sets him apart from a lot of players, is he still plays a premier position and center field and still has insane speed to steal you 30 bags a year, maybe 40 this year with the new rules. So at the end of the day, he can be an average hitter and still provide a tremendous amount of value. It's just the team needs him to be a 130, 140, 150, top 20 hitter, WRC plus wise, like hitter in the league. They kind of need him to do that, and he's not doing it. And again, that comes down to how they built the team. That's less on the man himself. And he's just been pretty abysmal in high leverage situations, which that might just be by merit of him being young, might just be sped up in those high leverage situations, and maybe that improves with time. That hypothesis would make sense. Like, the more experience you have in the bigs, the more experience you have hitting in those high leverage situations, the more you're comfortable doing it. I think he'll be fine. It's just been a weirdly average year from that man, but I have utmost confidence in him bouncing back. Even later this year, you never know. Teoscar Hernandez, like I said, another guy who's had a pretty average year, one the front office was banking on having a more Teoscar Hernandez-y like year, but he was raking against the Blue Jays, a revenge series for him, had that walk-off, had the game-winning RBI. He's been pretty clutch, actually. He's been quite. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can get them if I want. I'm not going to. He's been pretty good in those high leverage situations, and I don't know where I stand with him in terms of this trade deadline, the end of the year, offseason. I don't know, but he's been hitting really well, and it was really good to see passion from him after he hit that walk off. And honestly, recently, passion from Kolten Wong. Two guys we haven't seen much passion in, and Kolten Wong has had a great attitude, it looks like, on the bench. Teoscar has had a better attitude, I think, just because he's hitting better. Yeah, it's good to see. I think fans need to see that, that side of players sometimes. They need to see that they really are playing for the name across the chest. But not much else for Teo. Just been hitting really well, raked against the Blue Jays. Hopefully that can continue. That would be huge down the stretch, especially with Jared Kelenic now out. And last big thing before some just random Mariners shit, the pitching call-ups. We saw Prelander Berroa and Devin Sweet make their debuts. Prelander Berroa was highly anticipated after we saw him in spring training and the nasty stuff he has. He looked about as expected. He was pretty nasty, pretty wild. A rookie making his debut, wasn't perfect, wasn't bad. Back down in Arkansas now. They kind of just needed those two guys to come up and mop a couple innings to rest the bullpen after a very hefty workload after the break. And it was cool to see him in the bigs. You can see that stuff will play in the bigs at some point. He'll rein in that command, but I think he will be down the stretch this year, maybe even a decent reliever, and next season going into it, I think could be a solid relief piece in that bullpen. Devin Sweet, his changeup is beautiful. I hadn't seen him pitch a whole lot. I knew his name, and it's cool. He's undrafted. He went to an HBCU making his debut. Like, that's really rare to be both undrafted and from an HBCU making your debut in the bigs. So that was really cool to see. He looked fine, got roughed up a little bit, but that changeup is pretty, man. So both of them back down in Arkansas, and that's what I wanted to talk about. The pitching call-ups, they can't just be shuttling these guys from Arkansas. That is clearly where they want their better pitching prospects to pitch, and it makes sense. You don't want them pitching in the PCL and AAA in a huge high-run environment. Like we saw Bryce Miller and Brian Wu all get called up from AA, and like Kirby did too last year, and Logan Gilbert I'm pretty sure did too. But you can't just be shuttling these guys from Arkansas. Like, specifically thinking of Isaiah Campbell. I understand having the prospects and pitchers you really value in Double A. Again, that makes sense. But now guys like Isaiah Campbell, who are going to be like up and down kind of fellas, you can't have them just going back and forth from Arkansas. Like, they've got to be in Tacoma. Isaiah Campbell at the very least. Because Baroa and Sweet, it was kind of a special situation for them to get called up and then sent down. I don't know if they'll be back up this year. I assume maybe. And they'll have to come back from Arkansas. They can't just be doing that. That's not good for morale. Just getting shuttled from Arkansas to Seattle and vice versa instead of Tacoma to Seattle. Like, it's just a thought. Isaiah Campbell, if he gets sent down again, I implore them to send him to AAA. Like, you've seen him in the bigs. Like, if he gets roughed up in Salt Lake or Reno in the PCL, like, whatever, it's fine. I feel like for ease and even just like mental health wise for those players, like getting called up from Arkansas, like they can't just have them be shuttling from Arkansas to Seattle. I just wanted to touch on that. Just what are you doing? Like, come on, that's brutal. Isaiah Campbell especially, because he's been up and down a couple times now. I expect him to at least go down to Tacoma if they send him down again. So we'll see, I guess. But some other Mariners quick hitter notes before some trade deadline predictions. I wrote down in my notes, Little League ass team. They just continue to kind of make these weird Little League mistakes, like fundamentals wise, like base running. They've made a lot of toot blands thrown out on the base path, looking like a nincompoop. A lot of toot blands this year. Not great. A lot of just random fielding errors, lack of communication in the outfield, specifically with Julio and Teoscar. I wrote down Little League ass team for a reason. They've reminded me of one. And even this weekend, it's really funny. They made some tough mistakes even against the Blue Jays this weekend. I'm looking at you, Tom Murphy, sometimes forgetting how to catch. He's been tough behind the plate. Good at the plate. Behind it, not so much. They even made some of these mistakes against the Blue Jays, but they ended up winning those games. And so all those Little League-ass team errors haven't felt quite as bad if they're winning. And all of those like mistakes and stuff, when they have, and if they've kept losing games that they made those mistakes in, and it makes them feel terrible. It makes them feel so much worse. And it's also just a good reminder that winning fixes everything. Like, you can make all those mistakes you want. If you're winning games, it's still like, I'd rather you not make those mistakes. But if you're winning, I haven't seen as many people complaining about those mistakes post-game this weekend after they took those dubs home. So, a good reminder, winning fixes everything. And now, last Mariners note. Dylan Moore, he's been hitting better, to be fair, but Dylan Moore, Colton Wong, AJ Pollock. I said last week, don't know why they're still on the team. I just give Jake Shiner at least a shot. Taylor Trammell's back up, and Pollock is on the forced forced IL, which I don't even know I doubt he's hurt. They probably just didn't want to send him down. I feel like they just keep running him out, and I don't know how much better they're doing for the team than at least giving a guy in AAA a shot, like Jake Shiner specifically. I'm not saying Jake Shiner would be amazing. It's just not even giving him like a chance. Like, you can send him down to AAA for a bit, Moore or Wong or Pollock, and if they hit well down there, then call him back up if like Jake Shiner again's not hitting well. I don't know. It's just tough to see them like still rolling out those guys. And I called them the perfect trifecta of financial mistakes in the end. They're not expensive at all. But it's like, I just feel like they've been stubbornly playing them because they probably think they can do better than they are, and they definitely can. Like, Moore has shown us, and even Colton Wong recently has shown us he's done a little bit better than previous. Pollock's been dreadful. But I think it's just they don't want to own up to the mistakes. Like that Wong trade, they traded for him, inherited his salary. That's one financial mistake. And I highlighted that trade last week. It's worked out for no one. And so it's tough to feel really bad about it because Winker's been terrible for the Brewers. Dylan Moore, they gave a very minor extension to. I think it was, 9 years, $3 million? Oh, God. Wow. I need to eat dinner. 3 years, $9 million. not 9 years, $3 million. That would be highway robbery. Another financial mistake that's not going to end up whatever. Like, if he's not good for 3 years, who cares? Like, that's $9 million. He's still fast, at least. And Pollock, they gave like the 1 year, $8 million or whatever to him. It's a perfect trifecta of financial mistakes, because they acquired or paid them in the 3 different ways you can in baseball. They inherited one from a trade, a contract from a trade. They bought one in free agency, and they extended one. It's just funny, and I feel like the front office has been reluctant to like send them through waivers to get them to Tacoma, because they don't want to own up to the mistakes they've made. But at least Dylan Moore's hit well this weekend. At least he did. It's just tough. It's tough. And Colton Wong, I will say, apparently his attitude has been a lot better. It's been noticeable in the dugout. Like, he's been a lot more chipper recently. I think I want to say it was Ryan Divish or one of the reporters tweeted something that it really was hard on him for Cabby taking his spot. Obviously, he could probably see it coming, but it's still really hard. I mean, he's like an 11-year vet, and that was his spot to lose, and he's never really lost a spot like that before. He's been a very good second baseman in his career. So it said that was very tough on him. And he's gotten over it, and he's been supporting like Caballero and the team a lot recently. So I think at least like dugout morale vibes, he's been better, which is really encouraging. But on field, I still think he shouldn't belong on this team right now. But whatever. That's it. That's it for the Mariners talk. Let's talk trade deadline. Let's talk about the situation I am in for the trade deadline. So the trade deadline is next Monday. Obviously, the 31st. Kicks in the 1st, August 1st. I'm going on vacation. I leave Thursday. And from post-noon on Friday to Tuesday afternoon, I will have no internet, no ability to communicate with the outside world, and no one will be able to communicate with me. And that is the weekend of the trade deadline, funny enough, right? So I'll have no internet, and I won't get to see anything that happens at the trade deadline, unless it happens like early on Friday. I'll have to just, right when I get internet back on Tuesday afternoon sometime, I'll have to just see what happens. I'll have to have, the trade deadline will be over, and I'll have to just go see what happened, which is pandemonium. I'm kind of excited to not know anything before then. I just, there won't be a pod next week unless I can squeeze one on. No, there just won't be a podcast next week. I'll be gone the whole week too, so won't be a podcast next week, and that means, I won't really have an emergency pod if the Mariners make a big trade, which I don't expect them to do, but that's my predicament. So I'm dark this whole next weekend, and the trade deadline will happen for me on Tuesday when I get internet again, and I'll get to see everything that happened. I'll get to see if Shohei got traded or not. It's going to be fun. So that's my situation. Now to some predictions before I enter the internetless world that I will be entering next weekend. I have some predictions. Ohtani. I got 0 predictions for this. I got no idea what they're going to do. No idea what's going to happen with him. If I had to guess, I'd say he just doesn't get moved. I think at this point, if they do trade him, it'd have to be with Rendon. I think they'd be dumb if they're trading him right now. Obviously, it's for the future. They'd be stupid to not have like a 100% Rendon has to go with him to get that contract off the books. I think would need to be done. That's the only prediction I have, is if he gets traded, I think they'd be dumb to not offload Rendon with him. It might lighten the return, but realistically, that's worth it to get that contract out of there, especially if they're maneuvering for the future. But other deadline predictions, I think the Mariners make at least one trade. It's Yuri Dipoto and the deadline. He can't not make a trade. Like he'd be going through withdrawals if he didn't make a trade at this deadline. He would not be okay. So I think they make at least one trade. I think they probably make more than one, and it's not a blockbuster. You know, I've drafted some fun ones with the Cardinals and other teams on MLB Trade Machine, whatever, but I think potentially, like, the Cardinals are actively trying to trade Dylan Carlson, center fielder. He's kind of fallen out of favor for them, hasn't quite hit like they wanted him to. He could be pretty useful to the Mariners, especially with Kelenic's injury. He's a switch hitter. He can play all outfield positions. I think he's a plus defender. He's totaled out this year to about a league average hitter, but he's really struggled against right-handed pitching. He's hit left-handed pitching really well, which kind of fits-ish the mold of what the Mariners need. I mean, they need hitting in general, but I also just think he's cheaper. I don't think he'd take a lot. Like, you could just give him Hancock, which I'd be okay with doing, like just trading Emerson Hancock for Dylan Carlson. Like, I feel like that could do it. And I think this is year 3 for him, so he's got team control. It would make sense, at least to just get him out of St. Louis, get him to a new scenario, and maybe he could be a above-average hitter for the Mariners. It'd be a cheaper move, especially with DePoto's comments, and given the Cardinals' need for controllable pitching in the next few years, and they have a lot of outfielders / like middle infielders, second basemen that they need to get rid of, like I've talked about. And given DePoto's comments, I don't think they're going to do a huge trade for like Nolan Gorman or Lars Nootbaar. I don't think they trade Arenado or Goldschmidt at this point, honestly. I just think Carlson's very attainable. His value is pretty low right now, essentially. I mean, they said they're going to trade him, basically. So I think Emerson Hancock could do it. Other trades the Mariners could make, I don't know. I would trade Seawald at this point. I think I'd trade him. But the Rays are interesting. So they have John Morosi tweeted this. God damn it, he tweeted this a couple days ago. I had this on my notes the past whole week to talk about Jonathan Aranda on the Rays. He can kind of play first, second, and third, and even, I guess, shortstop, corner outfield. I think he can play everywhere. He's been raking in AAA for the Rays. I don't know if they really have a spot for him on the MLB roster. He's just been raking in AAA, and I think the Rays will move him to get some help right now to, you know, make a huge push for the World Series. You could trade like Seawald. They always need a bullpen arm. Like, I don't know, Seawald, Hancock for a close to MLB ready pitcher. Travis Kuhn even, who's in AA right now, who I think could honestly slot into the Rays bullpen and they could do really good things for. Look at Devin Sweet, even Prelander Baroa. Like, the Rays could do good things with any reliever you give them. For Jonathan Aranda, he would really help the Mariners. I don't know what his value is across the league. I just feel like he'd be a good trade target. Like, go read John Morosi's tweet, because there's no room for him at their MLB level team right now. So I don't think the Mariners will trade for him, but that'd be cool if they did. And so, like, as I mentioned, 2 guys I talked about a couple weeks ago that would make sense to trade was Seawald and Teoscar. So Seawald, I don't know if they'll trade Seawald. I would personally. It just makes sense to do it right now. I'm not going to get into why. I already talked about that, but it just makes sense to do it now, especially because teams always need relievers. Teams want relievers, need relievers, will aggressively try to get relievers if you're a contender. You always need more relievers in this day and age. And he's probably at his peak value right now, which is why I'd trade him. It'd be tough to say goodbye, but I think he's one that could be traded to a contender for a controllable bat. Teoscar, genuinely have no clue what to do with. I have no idea. I don't think his value's super high right now. And given Kelenic's injury, I think it's just honestly worth hanging on to him, especially given the way he's played the past week. I think hanging on to him is better than anyone you could trade for right now with not giving up a whole lot. Because I still think, you know, his track record and him being, you know, Teoscar Hernandez, like, we know he's been a good hitter in his career. What's to say he's not going to light the world on fire down the stretch? He might. I think it's worth keeping on, like, hanging on to him for that reason. And as well as, after this season, he's a free agent. He qualifies. You can give him a qualifying offer, which would probably be like $20 million. If he declines it, you get a draft pick. If you don't sign another free agent, if he accepts the qualifying offer, 1 year, $20 million, I feel like is a gamble I'd be very willing to take for next year for Teoscar Hernandez. I wouldn't let that prevent me from going after any other outfielders. I just feel like it's not even that risky. 1 year, $20 million's nothing. Maybe that's too rich for that broke boy, John Stanton. But it's only 1 year, and worst case, he's similar to this year, and you targeted another outfielder, and he can play a third to fourth outfielder / DH role and hit decently well. And again, it's only 1 year. He expires after it, and you can give him another qualifying offer. I don't know. I think it's worth hanging on to him. I just don't think his value is high enough to warrant a trade right now. So another solid prediction I have before I get out of here: the White Sox, they'll be stripped for parts. That's an easy one. They're a cautionary tale of championship windows and how quickly they can absolutely crash and burn in baseball. They were the next team. People were like, oh, it's going to be White Sox World Series 2021. Like, that core failed. They failed. The championship window's gone. They're going to sell everyone this trade deadline probably. It's a cautionary tale. That's why I think if you're in the spot of like the Rangers, think about the Rangers for a second. They've invested a lot in the team, which has helped. Short term has helped a lot. And you have an offense where every bat has taken a significant step forward this year. Young bats have taken a big step. And you could be like, oh, so for the next few years we have like best lineup in baseball if you're just going off what those young guys have given you this year and be like, oh, they're only going to get better or stay the same, which is great. You cannot take that for granted, which is why the Rangers should absolutely freaking go for it right now. Because look at how quick it can crash or burn when you're looking at, oh, our young core is fantastic. Look at how quickly it can die. Look at the White Sox. That's why I never think it's worth being like, oh, we should, not really go for it because these guys are team controlled for years to come. That is a risky move. It's risky to go for it, but at the end of the day, in like a decade's time, if you have 0 championships, I'd much rather my team absolutely went for it all for a couple years and then was garbage for like 7 straight. And they were amazing for 3 but never won or something, or at least they like meaningfully went for it. A lot of money, a lot of trades, pushed all the chips in. I'd rather the team does that. My team does that in a championship window than like projecting for the future of like, well, we want to, like the White Sox, we want to just contend for a while. That is the best case scenario, but sometimes that's just not how it works. Not everyone is the Braves or the Astros, Most of these teams are unfortunately more similar to the White Sox. Even look at the Blue Jays. They're really good right now, but they got to be feeling a little sweaty right now because they have a championship core that hasn't quite worked out these past few years, and they're running out of time. They're a good team right now, but it could crumble real quick. So I think the White Sox are the most intriguing team because I think like they'll just be sold for parts. Like the Rangers, the Astros, the Angels, just from a Mariners perspective, would be really smart to try to go and get Lucas Giolito or Lance Lynn and like one of their mini relievers that will be available, like Joe Kelly, Reynaldo Lopez, Cannon Middleton, Kendall Graveman. All of those guys will probably be dealt. They could all be pretty useful to contenders. Like Lance Lynn's not having his best year. Giolito's been really good. But even just like pitching, teams just need bodies pitching wise, especially this year. So, otherwise, like the Mariners don't need pitching really. I think if the Mariners trade with them, I've talked about Eloy. I want Eloy. I think they should try to get him. I've said that for months now. It feels like I think that'd be a good guy to try to target. Perfect DH. Otherwise, like they'll trade Tim Anderson probably. I think it could be worth trying to get Tim Anderson just to try to play second base and back up short because he's had a dreadful year at the plate. But I feel like he could be one of those guys that change of scenery, and then all of a sudden he just flips it on and is Tim Anderson again. And that's very hopeful, but at the same time, he'd be so cheap, insanely cheap. His value is on the basement right now. So I think he'll still get traded to someone, and someone will try to just trade for him and be like, you know what, screw it. Let's just throw Tim Anderson against the wall and see if he can recapture some of that TA magic that we all know and love of years past. I think I'd rather have Eloy. Otherwise, I don't see other position players really moving for them. They don't have a lot of other good ones to move. Like Luis Robert would take a tremendous haul. I don't think they'll move him at all, but it would take a lot to trade him. I don't think they're out of... I think they'll listen to conversations to trade him. I don't think they're going to. It would take a lot. This one's running long. No B-Ref player of the week this week, obviously. But a couple quick predictions. I think Stroman gets traded to the Orioles. I think Bellinger gets traded to the Yankees. And then when I get back on Tuesday, I'm excited to see and find out that Shohei Ohtani's been traded to the Rockies. I'm excited about that one. I'm very excited to see that. Go Rockies. Hopefully it would mean he can't break the Aaron Judge American League record, but you trade him to the Rockies and he gets 2 full months to hit in Coors as his home park. I think he could go 60 plus. He's on pace right now for 59. I think he could make a run at Bonds if you gave him Rockies. What I would do in a perfect world from just a neutral fan, obviously I want to see him in the playoffs, but what would almost be more fun is if he gets traded to the Rockies and he says, all right, I'm done pitching for the year. I don't want to pitch in Coors. I'm full-time hitting. He hits every day. He breaks Bonds' record. Hits like 35 AL home runs and 45 National League home runs in 2 months. That'd be fantastic. That'd be amazing. I still can't believe the owner was like, yeah, why not? It'd be fun to get him. I'm so fired up that he said that. Real quick, before I go, Mariners play the Twins this week, at the Twins and at the D-backs. That's a tough one. And they come back home against the Red Sox. Right now they sit at 14.9% chance to make the playoffs. That is not terrible for this part of the year, but it's not great. I'm really intrigued to see what the deadline holds, and again, I will not be online all weekend. So excited to come back and see the pandemonium that has occurred on the trade deadline. But if you've listened this far, really appreciate it. If you really, really actually listened this far and like the show, rate and review. I'm not really trying to monetize this podcast, but rating and reviews just would make me feel good, about myself. So, but either way, appreciate the listen. Obviously, have a great rest of your week, and next week after that won't be any pod next week. But of course, I'll leave you with this: Go Mariners.